Hey, good afternoon and aloha. Nice to see you. Familiar faces here. We have some folks online on Zoom. Welcome to you. And then later, we welcome you to this conversation. You know who we are, but again, for my name is Thomas Dowd. Pages. And this is our monthly Princeville series, where we work in collaboration with the Community Association just to bring us together. Learn community, work and how to do more for wildlife. Thank you for being here and being a part of all of that. And again, this is a friends group. We dedicated nonprofit. Three national wildlife have three beautiful states for the protection of wildlife. LA, and Kaua Point. And so what gets us welcome? So comfortable. Morning is through spaces at LA and Kaua. As well the protection of native seabirds. How do we do that? It's basically as a friends group bringing resources for our friends that do fish and wildlife. What do you need largely by doing that? Delivering funding and in-kind staffing support. Largely, we help fund many different refuge programs. Science-based work, habitats, or restoring habitats, all kinds of good things. More help. And the financial means and staff. We as well get out and spread the story. This of these awareness. So we get out and we get off the refuge and talk stories. We also very strong links into the
Thomas,
very common.
I'm going to stop you because I'm getting reports on the Zoom that it's very garbled.
Okay.
So can you maybe hold it up? Thank you.
So
Let's see if that.
see if that is a little. There's I can switch my. I'll keep talking. That's not. I think garbled with my shirt here, but one of the programs that we're is the Rica. Is the chief thing I mentioned. Working directly and then as well, this.
I'm hearing no change.
No change. Might be. That is better. Every word that Jacqueline says. But the future of conservation relies on young people aware of our native ones and the places that they depend upon and find ways to any word from our friends online, is that better?
I don't have. And everybody's saying it's still bad. Could it be the fans like causing an issue that we should turn the fans off right here at the front of the room?
A unique problem.
Probably the ones over here on this side.
I'm sorry for speak up and loudly and we'll see if we can try to overcome them. I'm not sure what else to do. These are going to be mine. right here.
Hold on.
If you joined us last time.
Wait.
Part of our celebration education, we are very honored to work with the littles and educate them about the work that we do. But on the other end of the spectrum as well, we as a Friends group have an annual scholarship fund that we are really pleased to support. And this year, we were very honored to select 14 recipients and give away $30,000 in scholarships to students studying conservation-based careers. Yes. Look at all those beautiful, amazing faces that are going to go out into the world. And I truly believe that this is one of those that's immeasurable to understand how that's going to ripple out in the world and come back and help wildlife right here in Hawaii. Okay. Okay. You solved it. You're amazing. In any event, for those who may not know us as well, there are several ways you can help. Join us out at Kilauea Point, shop in our nature store. All of the proceeds of our nature store get channeled back into supporting our wildlife. Volunteer with us. Be happy to chat with anyone about volunteer opportunities, and then donating and joining a part of our mission helps to underwrite all this great work that we do. So anyway, that's my once a month plug for who we are and why we're here and why I get to stand in front of you. And a quick plug as well, our next conversation will be on September 16th, where we're going to invite our friends from Pacific Rim Conservation. They are a really instrumental partner in the biological management of Kilauea Point in particular, and they're going to talk story with us about their work in Nihoku. So that's going to be a fun one. Join us in this room or on Zoom on the 16th of September. Today, we have with us Jacqueline Nelson, and I love this picture because you never get to see her this relaxed, other than this moment right now, because I'm talking too long. But you'll see throughout the rest of this presentation just the fever pitch of work that they do, she and the team at Save Our Shearwaters, to help support our wildlife. But she gets to get out in the world as well and do some outreach, and got to sit down for a moment. So I'm pleased about that. What I did just want to say for a moment is, when we come together as a community, so often we're talking about wildlife that are in peril, numbers that are crashing, a lot of things to be concerned about, and really trying to understand if there's a place for us as humans to make a difference. And one of the things that I love about today's talk about fallout season is one of the places that really gives me hope about humanity and humanity's intentionality to be able to make a difference, to reflect back on changes in policy and legislation that have led to shifts in light management, to talk about how ribbons are placed on high wires to help avoid bird strikes, and how we as a community of humans come together and learn about these species and the challenges of fallout and the numerous ways that we can volunteer to make a difference in that. That's where human intention meets this challenge and gives me hope for the future. And so with that, I'm really excited to re-welcome back Jacqueline Nelson and our dear friends at Save Our Shearwaters to our series and for this great conversation. So aloha and welcome.
Hopefully that works.
Let me not put it in your file.
Yeah,
There.
not my flowers, please. Thank you so much. Wait, no, I need a hug before you go off.
Thank you, dear friend.
Gotta start it with some love. All right, well, hi everyone. I'm so excited to see everyone today. I know we have a few familiar faces. I've been lucky enough to give this presentation. This is my third year in a row, and I try to spice it up each time and provide a little bit more insight each time that we do the presentation. So I've changed it up a little bit this year, but this is one of my favorite nights of the year. I get to come and hang out, and I do look now. I'm a little relaxed with my lei, and we're gonna chat. I'm pretty casual presenter, so if you guys have questions as I go, feel free to ask them, but I'll be open also for questions at the end. The title of my presentation is "What's the Fuss About Fallout?" So a lot of people know or have heard the term fallout on the island, but are not actually sure how we go about tackling the problem as a whole, or only hear about one aspect of fallout of our lights, and collecting them, but we don't actually know in depth what's happening, what's the cause, how have people been working on the island together to kind of combat this challenge for decades. So That's what we're going to talk about today. If it works. There we go. All right, so we're going to start a little bit with a background about the SOS program. I'm known to get off on a tangent. I could give 100 presentations on various topics, so I'm going to try to keep it pretty succinct. But what is SOS and why are we here? So SOS actually was started in 1979 as pretty much predominantly a rescue project. So it's kind of more collect all the birds that happen from fallout, direct release them into the wild without a ton of care. Since then, we have turned into the only federal and state permitted facility on the island to rehabilitate native wildlife. We can accept all native birds and the Hawaiian hoary bat for rehabilitation here. We're only a year-round team of 5 employees. So there's myself, Molly, our program director, and then we have our rehabs team, which I'll go over as well. So tiny team doing quite a lot of work. You can see on our website too, we have posted our impact report from 2024 if you want to see the numbers of what we did in 2024. We have some fun little photos of some patients. That's also the amazing veterinarian that we work with, Dr. Juan. He's the veterinarian for Hawaii Wildlife, but he also comes to assist with our cases and provides consults for us as well. And that's him working on an albatross, I think last spring. You had to point it very specifically. All right, so our team. So in case you guys haven't met us, we also have some new faces on our team this year. This is myself and Molly, our program director, our rehabilitation manager, Amanda, and then we have 2 wonderful wildlife rehabilitation technicians who just joined us this spring, and that's Lauren and Madeline, and we are thrilled to have them. But this is who you're talking to anytime you call us. It's one of us. We're not bigger than this. We have some amazing volunteers that help us out as well, but this is our core staff doing all of the native rehab on the island. Yeah. We admit about 500 to 600 a year, and it is kind of steadily increasing the past couple years. Yeah. We also run a 24-hour hotline phone, which I think a lot of people in this room have called us and worked with us off this phone. Our callback goal is always 15 to 30 minutes, just so you guys know. And you can text it because it's a cell phone that we literally carry in our pocket as we walk around. I like to put this now into my presentations to let people know, because I think it's a misconception of the public. We don't have a front desk. There's no person waiting to answer your call at a desk and going to type in all the info. The phone is answered by one of the 5 of us, all of which are doing active rehabilitation normally of the time, or we're on meetings or calling other people and trying to add support onto the phone. Additionally, the people who hold the phone, including myself, I hold it twice a week overnight. We work the entirety of the day and then answer your calls at 2 a.m. during shearwater fallout season, and then work the following day to take care of the birds that you've called about. So I just always like to let people know, like, it's not like this crazy system. We're not very fancy. It's just the staff answering the phone and doing the best we absolutely can. So I like to add in the little caveats. Most of the time, we're unable to deploy for response after hours because we're a tiny team. Normally on any day, it's only 3 of us working. If there's like an absolute emergency, we might be able to get out there, but we do answer and are able to assist and get the bird to a safe location after hours. We answer the phone at 2 a.m., we answer the phone at 1 a.m., we answer at 3 a.m., and we're always available to assist that way, but we just can't deploy from our homes because we also then have to work the following morning. And if we did that for every call, I don't think we would stop working. So our staff do need to have a little bit of break. And then I always just ask the public to be kind and patient with us on the phone. I think for a lot of people, this is their first time interacting with injured wildlife. And so we know that it's an emergency and that you care deeply about what is going to happen, that you want to get the bird help as fast as possible. That is also our goal as well. We're trying to get the bird as fast as we possibly can, but we're also dealing with 20, 30, 40 patients that are currently in care that we do need to take care of. So we have to balance out how we handle that. So sometimes it just takes us a minute to figure out the task. Click it again. And then this is our property. So we're actually on the agricultural station. So the other thing that I like to kind of tell people is, like, we don't have a fancy facility. We are working out of retrofitted cargo containers. Our goal in the future is to have a purpose-built facility so that we would have like a full washroom, intake, isolation spaces, more larger aviaries. But at this point in time, our program is located, we lease a little piece of land from the university, and we have these special containers that were made to rehab birds. So they have like AC, proper walls, flooring, and everything that we need to ensure proper biosecurity. but it's not fancy and there's not a lot of space. So we have to do quite a lot in a little location. Also at the beginning of this video, you guys can see here, this big building right here, this is our pool yard. So we have two 12-foot diameter conditioning pools for patients. And then we also built a large aviary thanks to Pacific Birds grant about 2 years ago, which is quite beautiful. And I just went in today to do something with a patient and realized that all of our native plants that we had planted have exploded. And you're like trying to dance around a huge palm in there. But it's quite lovely for the birds, quite hard for us to navigate in the pen. And I was looking and I was trying to get down to, put some food down. And then I like moved a palm leaf and one of the boobies that was in the enclosure was just on his perch. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And I went and put the food somewhere else. But it's getting to the point where the plants are taking over. They need a little bit of a trim. But that's what we're working with. We have about one cargo container. It's 8 by 40 feet. And then we have an isolation container that's 8 by 20 feet. And then we are also in the process of getting another 8 by 20 foot isolation container for biosecurity purposes. So that's pretty exciting that we are expanding a little bit, but our ultimate goal in the future is to fundraise for a purposeful facility because our birds deserve it. So we just work with what we can at the time, but that is the ultimate goal. So wildlife rehabilitation as a field. So this is always an interesting topic because this is actually a very new profession in general. So a lot of misconceptions about the field and how it's developed. It's developed very quickly, especially within the last 2 decades, I would say. Started in the 70s and 80s. Before that, it wasn't really anything that was, it's kind of just people piecemeal wherever they could, doing whatever they can, but it wasn't a real profession. Nowadays, it is, and we have 2 kind of guiding lights, I call in our profession. It's NWRA and IWRC. So those guys kind of lead the charge in standardizing wildlife rehabilitation across the United States and internationally. SOS is lucky to go to this conference every year with NWA where we get to talk to veterinarians and wildlife rehabbers across the United States. I was lucky enough to go 2 years ago and give a talk about white-tailed tropic bird care. And when I asked anyone who's worked with a tropic bird in the room, in a conference room full of all these people, only one person raised their hand, and it was someone that I had talked to about their bird because they needed advice. So we're a really tight-knit, small community of professionals. Our ultimate goal is to return healthy individuals that have suffered injury or abandonment to their habitat so they may become contributing members of their population. So we can't release anything that is not in tip-top shape because we need them to be able to survive, and wildlife are not about like the same as your domestic animals. They can't get pain medication every day. They can't get arthritic because it's going to cause them long-term issues, and they need to be able to get away from predators, and they need to be able to dive 120 feet. They need to be able to do this depending on the species. So we have to make sure that they're absolutely 100%, which is not an easy task, especially considering we are essentially working with animals that have no history, no known medical history. So you're trying to figure it out. Your patient can't talk to you, and you have no idea how they got into that state in the first place. So it's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes investigation every time we get a bird in to discover what's going on. I like to add in that we have a focus on reversing effects of anthropogenic impacts, not naturally occurring phenomenon. So we're not here to intervene in naturally occurring situations for the animals. They have natural life cycles. They have things that naturally happen. Parents will abandon nests. Sometimes they're just not smart and they do something dumb and they get themselves in a situation. If it's caused by anthropogenic causes, so like fishing line takes, hit by vehicles, golf carts, it's always a gray area because how much of human impacts has happened in the entirety of the environment? A lot. So it's a very blurry line, but we do like to emphasize that like the purpose of rehabbers is to try to reverse the impact that we're having on the animals on our planet. It's not to change what they're naturally doing in any way. And then permits. So I also like to do a little highlight this year on why I'm allowed to do it and why the average person here isn't. So this is just one of the permits that we hold at SOS. It's a migratory bird rehabilitation permit. And this permit is required to take, transport, or temporarily possess sick, injured, orphan migratory birds for rehabilitation purposes. And additionally on my permit, it specifically states which birds I'm allowed to do and which ones I'm not allowed to do, and the people on the permit. So you have to apply for one of these and have a certain amount of hours and experience, and then can also change sometimes depending on the area that you're in, what the requirement is to be able to qualify for one of these. You also need to be able to show proof of proper housing and enclosures that are up to standards and care standards. So you need to explain all of your plans for all of the birds and all of the things in order to get one. I also like to point out, because people always ask me this when I bring up permits, there is a Good Samaritan provision written in there, which allows any person who finds a sick, injured, or orphan migratory bird to take possession of the bird in order to immediately transport it to a rehabber. So that kind of provides you some protections, because a lot of the birds that we're working with are threatened or endangered or fall under the Migratory Bird Act, which is where this permit kind of stems from, is the Migratory Bird Act and the protections that allows. So if you find an endangered bird, the Good Samaritan clause covers you in order to capture and bring that to me or to a fire station. So a lot of people don't know about that clause because they're like, I'm not legally allowed to pick it up. And we're like, yes, you are, if you're bringing it to me. So that kind of covers you. So this is just one of the permits we hold at SOS and that we have to provide reporting on every year. Additionally, there's additional reporting required on just for our threatened and endangered intakes. There's an additional level of reporting that we have to do. On top of that, we have a state permit, which you also need to do rehabilitation in the state of Hawaii. I'm not getting into that one, but the state permits vary from state to state on what's necessary for you to hold that permit, and you need both in order to rehab birds here in the state of Hawaii. More fun things. So this is the Wildlife Rehabilitators Code of Ethics. I like to bring it up again, just to show some of the professionalism in our field and kind of what guides our decision making. And just so the public has a general knowledge of like, what is our goal and what are we trying to do? I have kind of 3 highlighted here. We should acknowledge limitations and enlist assistance of a veterinarian or other trained professional when appropriate. So I think it's great for anyone in their field to know their own limitation, but I know that I'm not a veterinarian, and I will ask Dr. Juan if it is outside my general knowledge base, or I will even consult. On a latest case, we're going to be up to 3 vets consulting on one case to try to get alternative opinions. So we're not just here making willy-nilly calls about anything, even if we don't know what we're talking about. If we don't know what we're doing, we are calling people who do and trying to get the best advice that we can. Lucky for us, we have such an amazing system for wildlife rehabilitators in the country. And we know a lot of the top veterinarians that have actually like written the standards books and written the journal articles and are working with similar species. And so we have quite a great connection. The other one is we should provide professional and humane care in all phases of rehabilitation, protecting the welfare, respecting the wildness, which is the big one, and maintaining the dignity of each animal in life and death. So we have to know as professionals that we're not working with domestic animals. These are wild animals and should be treated as such, even though they have to be in temporary care for us to be able to get them back to that point. So at no point should we be coddling them, treating them like our personal pets, showing them to people that just want to stop by and be like, look at this cool tropic bird I have today, and pulling him out of his enclosure. That's not what we do. These are wild animals and need to be treated as such. We need to work on the basis of sound ecological principles, incorporating appropriate conservation ethics and an attitude of stewardship. I talk about this one because it incorporates a lot into our island specifically, because we're working with such threatened and endangered species that are on the brink in certain populations of they could really go either way. We're talking populations of forest birds like less than 5, and then less than 1,000 for some of our water birds, less than 700 for some water birds. And we have to take that into account as wildlife rehabilitators too. So even more so in our island and the special animals that we're working with, of the importance of the individual to the entirety of the population of the species. And we take that extremely seriously. We work with the Friends group, we work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we work with the state, we work with Pacific Rim, who's giving a presentation next time. We work with pretty much every conservation group in order to have the best knowledge at hand for the birds that we're working with. So if there's a question about what they're doing in the field right now, like I have the privilege of being able to call the guys in the field and being like, what's it looking like up there? Are they doing well? Are we fledging? What's going on? And so that's quite a privilege that we have here that you don't really find elsewhere in the States, but is something that we take very seriously. And then we also have our standards book. I just like to highlight, that's fun, is that SOS is actually featured in the standards for shearwater care for our entire profession. As well as we have our own journal. So everyone has a journal for their profession, essentially. We have our own that talks about interesting cases across the United States, what medications worked, what didn't, what care plans work, what just case studies on one incident in one area in case it comes up again in the future. So we have to stay up to date on all of that as well and see what's happening in our field because it's ever developing. If you can imagine, human care still has so much to learn and grow in just human health. And then there's domestic animals and how much there's still to learn about domestics. And then we're talking wildlife. So we have so much to learn and grow, and it's up to me and my staff to make sure that we're as up to date on the newest research as possible. So we're providing the most up to date care. So this is an average morning. I showed this last year. This is me running around, more often how you see me if you ever run into me. The first one, I was banding a white-tailed traffic bird. We do band every patient before release in case there is a recapture it later in the future. We can see that how long it was successful for. I'm filling out lots of charts, and then I think it's like a barrage of nene. So a few wound care, you'll see me gavage, which is that tube that I put in. And you kind of just go at changing gloves between each patient for biosecurity, flipping my towel, taking care. I'm bandaging a wing. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I don't think I knew. I think I blacked out. Just doing a bunch of stuff, getting through all of the patients each day. So that's kind of a barrage, and that's what I'm actually doing. Yeah, that's where I collapse after the end of the day. And then this is just kind of a snapshot of some of the different patients that we've had. I didn't really change up any of the pictures, honestly, because these are some of my favorite pictures of patients. I added in a cute little Uaukani over there. A nice, one of our patients went viral recently on social media. It's not this one, but it's the same family of bird. And people have been calling them mold spores, which is making me laugh really, really hard on a daily basis. They're like, oh, such a cute mold spore you have in here. And I'm like, oh, thanks, guys. We have albatross getting a wash. We have a little Uau chick that we hand reared one year, a really sad Uaukani. He did survive, even though he looks really rough. He was caught by cat, and his little nair collapsed in, which is essentially like their nostril. They had to put a little catheter in it, which is why there's tape on his bill. But he did make it. This is one I actually rescued on my way on vacation. He was hit by a car on the road going down when I was going home from work to leave for my vacation that I had been dreaming of for so long. And then I watched him get run over by a car on my way down and immediately had to go find him because then he tried to fly, landed in guinea grass, and then I had to go hike in guinea grass and get him back up to SOS. So we laughed about that in the office because it was pretty classic when you work in wildlife rescue. Like the second you get a break, they're like, no, you don't. And they show up right in front of you. He did quite well though. Mm-hmm. Oh, there we go. So this is the expectation of what people think we do every day. They're like, oh, look at cute animals and they're eating cute things. Adorable, lovely, right? So fun. All of these two are cameras in the enclosure, and this was me filming a coworker giving some fluids to one of our bats. And then this is the reality what we're doing every day. So this is Lauren. She kind of filmed like a day in her life, time lapsing, and you can see the clock just kind of keeps going. And you're like, how many things can she do in 10 minutes? The world may never know. She's doing laundry, she's prepping food, she's prepping waterfowl for the birds. She's doing dishes, which is never ending. So it kind of made me giggle when she showed me this little compilation of her day. And I thought was a good, what we show the public and what we're actually doing behind the scenes is just a whole lot of cleaning. She's vacuuming the pools, cleaning out the filters, making sure they're clean for the birds. And this is a day in her life, every day. This is not a joke. This is what she does every single day. And you have to do it every day because you need to provide a clean environment for birds to be able to heal. So I like the expectation versus reality. And then we get a lot of judgment from the patient. So not only are we doing all that, but we're getting judged while we do it for being in their spaces if we need to be. She went in here to try to give him his mice for the day. And she had a panic attack because she couldn't find him in the enclosure. And she's like, oh my gosh, something happened. And then she looks up and he's in the tallest plant and he's absolutely judging her for looking like she's losing her mind because she thought he was gone. Normally we don't take out our phones and film the enclosure, but she thought it was kind of a funny moment. So we're doing all that and the birds hate us while we do it. But we're doing our best for them. So that's kind of an overview of our just general SOS operations. And now we're going to kind of talk about specifically fallout season and what fallout season is and how SOS goes about tackling that every year. It is why our program was initially founded. As you just saw, it is no longer our sole purpose of the program. We work year round all the time, not just during fallout. So what's even the big deal? Like, what are we really talking about here? So fallout season is mainly shearwaters and petrels, and it's mainly young shearwaters and petrels. So it's predominantly fledgling birds, which means birds that are leaving their burrow or their nest for the first time. It's not quite as often adults. They're kind of a little more learned, a little more skillful. They know what to avoid. They're not as confused by lights. The fledglings are the ones that are kind of essentially falling out of the sky. So, and that's because they're naive. They don't know yet. They haven't been in and out of the colony. This is a new journey for them. This is essentially when light pollution disorients them and causes them to land in areas that they can no longer take off in. So light pollution essentially looks like giant moons in the sky, and they're using the light of the moon to navigate. The lights are going to confuse them, and they're going to ground in Target's parking lot. They're going to ground by Costco. They're going to ground in your lanai if you have a light on. And we get several calls about that every year. And they go, hey, I have this bird that just walked up onto my lanai. And I'm like, do you have a giant light on? And they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, maybe turn that off for a little bit and you can bring the bird to this aid station. So once grounded due to light attraction, they're vulnerable to numerous threats, such as invasive predators, collisions, car strikes, and they're unable to get flight again most of the time due to their physiology. So our birds, he's kind of showing you his backside. They have like legs very far back. Also, you can see on our beautiful mounts provided by the Friends group. Their legs are kind of far back. They're not like your little forest birds that can just like jump up and take flight. They need like high wind speeds or a cliff to actually be able to get the leverage to get flight up. So if they landed in this room, he would not be able to get flight and fly around our room. He would just be waddling and trying to hide in a burrow. So that's why it's such a major issue, because once they ground, they can't get back up. Once they're grounded, you have no idea how long they've been grounded if you're a member of the public. So we always say, you got to bring them in. Sometimes I tell people this and they're like, well, just go release it at the beach. And I'm like, no, this bird could have been grounded for a week and is now severely dehydrated. They're really prone to sepsis and infections. If they get caught by a cat and they don't get antibiotics, that's a death sentence for a shearwater. Most of the ones we get are always dehydrated. And then depending on the severity, they could have lost muscle tone from being grounded and struggling in the area. And then this is just, I stole this from the ARC crew, but this is just an example of an uwa'u in his little burrow. A lot of people too on the island don't even realize that our birds don't nest in trees. So they actually are little ground nesters, and they love to burrow and dig. And so during fallout season, you'll often find them, and I think I have some photos later on, they're trying to hide. So you'll find them like with their little butts stuck out of a bush, like not where they're supposed to be, or like under your car. And they're just gonna sit there kind of like, they look like little footballs and they're just there. And they'll be like, I'm hiding. So that's like their natural reaction, is to try to burrow for a safe location. Then I just have cute little Uwa'ukani chicks that we raised. All right, so meet the birds. So these are kind of the three primary ones that we see. We also see storm petrels as well. But we have the a'o, the uwa'u, and the uwa'ukani. These two are endangered. The uwa'ukani is not, but is still getting quite devastated in different areas of our island due to predators as well as light attraction. So we see quite a lot of them during fallout season as well. When I first started, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really know that much about shearwaters. I was like, how do you tell them apart? They all look the same. And so I like to think of like the a'o has kind of the white line right at the middle of his jaw that comes up and down. The uwa'u has white that goes up the forehead. And the uwa'ukani is more like a gradient overall than like a stark color difference. So it's more like overall gray. That's how I learned them myself, and I found it helpful in how I teach people in the future. They have a lot more differences than that, including like their feet coloring and their bill shape, but that was the most obvious one to me. Now I get data heavy, guys, so stick with me. All right, so this is last year's fallout in a very simple chart. I only included a'o and uwa'ukani because those are the two greatest birds that we have during fallout season in terms of numbers. We also get uwa'u fallout in November, but we don't get as many as we do of these two species, so I didn't include it in this graph. The red is going to be our a'o admitted, and then the blue is going to be the uwa'ukani admitted, and then the green is your moon cycle. So these are full moons and these are new moons. And so we just talked about the fact that light attraction is kind of the main thing that brings birds down. What do you think affects that if they're following the light of the moon? We have a new moon versus a full moon. Our fallout levels tend to differ drastically during the time of the season. So you can see here our first new moon, we started to get a little peak, and then right after the moon hit, we got a bunch of birds the next following day. And then we kind of kept peaking. Once we got this bright moon, we got less birds. Once it started to dim again, we started to get more. And the other trend you can see here is that it starts with a'o fallout, so they fledge first. Then we get a little bit of a break, and then we hit uwa'ukani fallout. So we kind of say we get like a week respite in the season between the two species, and then they all start coming from the Wa'ukani. So they also started peaking over here. And these guys can be a little bit more prone too, because they are nesting along our coastlines where the A'o are nesting in the mountains, that we do tend to see Wa'ukani a little bit more just haphazardly at times in and out of season, because they're so close to the lights just starting to get out of their burrows. Any questions about this graph before I change it? It's a fun graph. Ooh, did I skip one? No, I didn't. Okay. That being said, what are we trying to tell the public, right? Each year, I think everyone's heard, keep your lights off from September to December. Ideally, everyone is keeping their lights off September to December. Is that realistic of an ask of the public to not have a light on for the entirety of the time? Probably not. So I like to try not hyper focus my ask to just use new moon nights. So these are the 3 new moons that we're looking at for this year, the 21st of September and October, and the 19th of November. And so these are the dates that we would expect to see the most birds having issues getting out to sea. So if you can kind of focus your light conservation around those times, it's going to have the greatest impact. And so while ideally I'm going to ask everyone September to December, if you can't do that, just do it around these dates to help me out. Here we go. So other potential factors. So I talked about moon illumination. That is not the only thing that affects fallout. I would love if it were that simple and that life were that simple, but it's not. The other part is weather. So do we have a ton of cloud cover one night? And even if we had a full moon, is the moon even visible? If we have giant clouds covering the moon, it's essentially a new moon night. So that can also impact when we get a lot of birds in. We tend to even share within our team if the moon is really bright. We're like, she's looking beautiful, gonna be a great day at work. We like have a little group chat about the moon. The moon rise time also is a factor. So if the birds are fledging earlier in the night, a lot of the birds tend to leave the colonies when we've been around them right after sunset or early in the morning. So if the moon isn't rising until 12 a.m., how many birds are not actually getting the full effect of the moon illumination to help them out to sea? So for this year, the other dates of concern, just because the moon rise is kind of late and the illumination is low, are going to be October 11th to 12th and November 9th to 10th. So those are other dates of concern that we have kind of like logged in our list of factors for the upcoming season. The other thing that isn't maybe as well studied, or I haven't seen all as many studies on it, but is wind speed and direction of the wind. I know albatross monitors could probably attest that like a very good windy day coming off a certain way can cause more of the birds to fledge at a certain time. So that could be a factor for our birds too. If there's good wind, maybe more fledging that night. We still don't have as much data on that factor, but just kind of throwing it in there is just another thing that we have to think about, and that we can't just literally look at moon illumination and be like, this is going to be the worst time of year. There's so many things that go into it. While that's a primary factor, there's all these other unpredictable ones that I can't tell you in advance. So this is 2025 outlook. So stay with me here, right, guys, because I'm about to get a little wooey. So the moon cycle falls on the same dates essentially every 19 years. So because our program has been in operation for that long, we can pull historical data versus the moon illumination in 2006 to predict fallout for 2025 a little bit, okay? So this is our data from 2006. And this was before we had as many Wa'ukani. We weren't doing multiple species rehabilitation. The data is also not as standardized as it is now of how we do it, and not as thorough. So I always say data might not be great on it, but it's still a good visual representation. This year looks pretty brutal in terms of the A'o fallout that year. It seems like they did majority fledge right during the new moon cycle this time. So you kind of see this like huge peak, and there were a lot more birds coming in at that time for several different reasons. But you see this huge peak with the new moon, and then you don't really see a peak the second time for the Wa'ukani. Can't really explain that, except maybe that the data isn't as good, / the birds were maybe not having as much trouble. This is really old data. So now we see about an equal amount of A'o as we do Wa'ukani, and in the past it was way more A'o than Wa'ukani. So kind of the level of birds and the average number we get of each species has changed over the years, especially since 2006. So in general, looking at this, we are expecting a heavier year this year with the moon pattern. especially just historically from my brain of how many birds we get in certain dates in my head. A lot of them fall right exactly where the new moon is falling this year, in terms of the majority of the fledglings that we see come through our doors. As I said, we can't make a direct comparison from this chart to the expectation for 2025 for all the factors I just listed, but population changes for the birds in general is different. The population of the A'o versus the Wa'ukani is different than it was in 2006. Influence of other factors aside from just illumination. It's historical data when we were doing a lot more birds and it was not as concentrated into a rehabilitation program. And then different program operations protocols and public awareness changes how many birds are actually found and brought in on any given year. So we use it as a tool to analyze possibility for this coming year, just so we're prepared and we can expect when we're going to see the most birds, but not a direct comparison. This is just me talking to you guys right now. This is what I think I look about. And then I'm like, it all connects if you just think about it really deeply, guys. I like to make fun of myself. So this is also just a quick kind of overview. This is live admissions and releases for SOS for the past 4 years. So we did have more birds 2022, 2023, and then we had a little bit of a light year last year, which was quite nice. This year we expect to see another spike in numbers. But it has our live admissions and then our releases. This one is of the A'o. So we got in 130 live birds and we released 118 of them. And then for the wedge-tails, you can see that the release rate is a little bit lower than the A'o. And the reason for that is that we get a ton of A'o, or we get a ton of Wa'ukani like babies or like sick ones near burrows, whereas people are not going to find sick, sad ones, and they don't have as much human impact of the A'o in the mountains. So the state that we get the wedge-tails in or the Wa'ukani in is usually a lot worse than the state of people bringing in grounded A'o. So it's just kind of the state of the bird and when they're being found kind of can affect their release numbers. So fallout is pretty great because a lot of the times the birds are doing pretty well. They might just need to go in the conditioning pool, maybe get a few meals in them, rehydrate them, and then they're usually good to go. So that's why our release numbers are so strong. But Wa'ukani are more prone to like getting caught by a cat, getting hit by a vehicle at their burrow, we have several that are just like in cats' mouths every year, dog caught. So there's just a lot more compounding factors for those guys because they're nesting in human areas, whereas the A'o are not nesting in human impacted areas. Yes.
COVID. Do you think that mutation had anything to do with that?
I would say anecdotally, without looking into it, yes. Because when I was working during these years, and then we had a significant reduction in birds overall because no one was out finding anything. So we were all in our homes. Yes. And so no one was actually out searching or looking. So it did impact our numbers overall, I believe, as a program. And then not only that, it impacted our release numbers because people weren't finding them quickly, they were in a lot worse state by the time they got to SOS. So COVID, it was kind of a dark time for us because it was like we weren't getting a lot of patients and the ones that we were on death's door. And so they weren't being found fast enough by the public. And there's nothing we could have really done about that at the time.
It's quite interesting because I was going the other way and I was thinking with less visitation, maybe there was less light.
I think one of the parts I talk about is just like, we rely so much on the public, and why I'm here today is to find the birds. So if the public aren't out finding the birds, we can't get them. We're only a team of 5 people. We're not out everywhere on the island every day. So, 99% of what we have in care comes from people finding them and being able to help us out and get them to care. So that, not a great time for us mentally, but yeah, it could have also impacted the numbers, but we haven't looked into it kind of deeper than that. It also could have been a better moon cycle. Could have fallen where they fledged 2 weeks before the new moon, and so they weren't as affected. This is just fun videos from seasons. So this is the good part of our job is when they're just hanging out, floating in our conditioning pools. So this is kind of a day in the life of an A'o in care. So they just work on their waterproofing most of the time and get fed. And this is a nice release of a Wa'ukani up a rock that, for whatever reason, makes me laugh because he looks like he jets up into the sky. Oh, it's gonna freeze. Well, or it stops. But yeah, so these are kind of 2 low vision of our pool. As I said, often we don't have camera. We're not walking around videotaping our birds. So these are often cameras just dangling off the side with rope. We just leave to film the birds. But this is kind of peaceful for us to see when they're all calm on the pool. This is kind of what shearwater season looks like inside our area. So each little box has a bird in it, and this is our seasonal technicians going through. She has a little tube there, so she's tube feeding a bird on her knee. She's about to pull out a bird to tube, and then there's only about, because we're an 8 by 40-foot container, we pretty much like bump butts everywhere we go. And so we're just kind of like trying to move around each other to try to stack up the birds efficiently. But they all have their own little burrow in their crate, and then they get to come out to swim. And then this is always fun. This is either birds about to all come in that came off of a route. So when we check the aid stations, how many birds we get in one day, or these is a load about birds that we're about to release. So sometimes we can have release days of like 16 birds in one day, but then sometimes in the peak of fall, it's like, oh, we got 16 out, and then 18 came in, and we're like, never mind, back to it, everyone. So that's kind of like, typically if you see our truck on the move, if you looked in, we're just riddled with bird boxes. Yes.
Are they banded, and you know the one that you released actually got out and didn't come back?
Yeah, so his question is, are they banded, and do we know if the ones released came back? So we do band every single bird at release. So all of these fledglings are banded. We have a banding permit, which is another legal permit you need to have in order to do it. So we do band everyone. The unfortunate part about shearwaters is that as a species, they have a very low survival rate of fledglings to start. So I think the last paper I read was like about 38% of fledglings actually survive to adulthood of healthy wild ones. So not a lot of them of the ones that we're actively working on are naturally going to make it just because of the natural process of the birds. I mean, you think about the albatross too, there's only a certain percentage that survive to adulthood. We do get band returns every once in a blue moon on shearwaters. I know we've had some that were like found under a power line that had one of our bands on it 3 years later. We've had some cool band returns on nene all the time because they're here and very visible. So we see our nene patients quite often, and often see them as repeat patients because they decide to get hit by a car again. And then we also had a really cool case, 2 cases about Aleula, one that we had rehabbed from botulism, and then I believe came back and had a mass on its back, and then we had to end up sending it for necropsy, so essentially for them to study and see what happened, and he had cancer. But it was 3 years later, so we assume that he was able to go back into the wild and breed for 3 years because we were able to save him from the botulism initially, so those are great to learn about. But the returns aren't as many as you would hope, and that's because the majority of what we're banding are young ones versus adults that have proven success rates. So you'd be more likely if I banded an adult to see a return on adult on a colony or something like that. The other part is a lot of people aren't directly monitoring the birds and their burrows, so no one's like going into burrows and checking if any of them have bands. So we actually don't get to know a lot of the time, but because of the band, people will report them, and then we get to hear cool stories about ones that made it. Yeah. We're going to release them. It depends on the bird and the species. Mainly for the shearwaters and petrels, we just released at Lidgate because it's the closest beach with good wind speed and the correct direction to our facility. And most of the time, it does not matter for shearwaters or petrels where you release them on island because they're all going back out to sea and not coming back to their burrow location. So think about the fledglings are leaving their burrow to get out to sea. So they just need to go out in the right direction. They don't really need to be released in a certain area on the island. The adults we can be a little bit more picky with. It's that we know that they're a nester and they have a brood patch, then we might try to release them closer to their original location. But something to keep in mind that we keep in mind is that a car ride is stressful. So if the bird is just going to go straight out to sea, we're not going to drive them an extra hour and a half in a car that's stressing them out for them to just go directly out, and they're great navigators, so they can normally figure it out. So we do like Lidgate, but then if it's a water bird, we always return to the site that they came from. So like on LA, the refuge, we always return the birds to site for that instance, because those guys are not going out to sea, they're breeding and they have their habitat in that one specific area. So it depends on the species. So next part, how can you guys help? So yes.
Are there any of SOS patients documented beneficiaries of any of the PRC programs and vice versa?
PRC programs, Pacific Rims program. Yeah, we have had patients from PRC before. We work with their team, so they have brought patients and have been successful before. I can't think of like any specific things, but yeah, yeah, we pretty much have gotten birds from any conservation crew on the island has come across an injured bird at some point, because those guys are the ones out there with the birds, so they're the most likely to find them. Does that help? So one of my big asks this year is last year I instigated new moon alerts for the community. So I tried to give a heads up about 5 days before the new moon that we were about to hit one, to remind people to turn off those lanai lights and try to keep our curtains closed. So I'm going to do that again this year for the 3 new moons. So if you guys are on social media or anything, just sharing it helps me get the word out to the community that, like, hey, this is just a time to be extra vigilant. Make sure you're on the lookout for any downed or injured birds during this time, and that helps us out and helps the birds, because the faster people find them, the higher the chance of recovery. So this is also just a lighting graphic that I show every year. It's kind of like the worst to the best in terms of lighting setups. You have like giant floodlights pointed up to the sky versus a nice slightly capped light, and then it's also on a timer to turn on and off at certain times. So that would be the best situation to have. We have curtains and parties and all different things going on in these different photos, but it kind of just shows you the gradient of what you can do and what the best options would be for your home or business. All right, these are my fun pictures. These are all patients that we've had come in. This is an example of how you might find a shearwater. So we have an here that was found, I think, at like Waimea High School, and the students called and they were like, there's an in the bush. And they send us this little photo. It's just his little feathers sticking out under the bush. So oftentimes if you're out in the day, they're going to be trying to hide and burrow under things. My only caveat that I tell people is that uaukani do nest along the coastlines here. So if you're on a coastline and it's a rock, it's probably right by their burrow. But if this is in your backyard or your home and you don't have an active colony, that's definitely a bird that needs to be rescued. This one is actually one that I rescued myself last year. And he's in a gutter on the 2nd floor of a apartment building in Lahui. I had a really nice man who called me and he was like, I have an uaukani on our roof. And I went, okay, I will come and try to get him off the roof. And by the time I got here, he had waddled his way into the gutter and was just kind of sad in the gutter and stuck inside. So we were able to get him, but that guy had pretty good observational skills to even notice this bird in the first place. He was not well. He was visually impaired when we found him. I don't quite remember his outcome, but I remember he was quite sick. So he was kind of stuck in this gutter and he couldn't really see where he was going to start with. And then this is one from, I think, last year, 2 years ago. This is an that just barely survived weed whacking. So someone was weed whacking right above him, and you can see the cut weeds right around him. And they were like, oh, and they stopped right in time. The bird was able to come to us completely unharmed. So the bird was actually in perfect condition. He did not get injured, but by the very, very tiny margin did he not get cut. So we tell like people who are landscapers and everything to be extremely careful this time of year, because they're burrowers, and if they see an alpaca or like a thick bush, they're going to just crawl their little way in there, and then you're weed whacking and you won't see these birds. So the landscaper is very, very kind and helped us out with this one. And he was released within 24 hours of arrival to SOS since he was perfectly healthy. So he had just grounded in a bad area and then was stuck.
How long does the AO stay out to sea?
They can stay out to sea for 4 to 5 years before returning to the island to breed. So they actually they're called pelagic birds for a reason. They live at sea. They don't need to come to land for any reason. I could go on a whole tangent about salt glands and how they can drink salt water, and they're really, really incredible and cool. But about 4 to 5 years before they're going to return to breed on the island again. And our island holds about 90% of the breeding population of a'o. So we're kind of like the last stronghold for the entirety of the species. But kind of cool that they just live on open water for 4 to 5 years, don't need anything. So we're going to be observant and we're going to be prepared. So pretty easy to be prepared. You just need a cardboard box with some holes punched into it, and maybe a nice little towel if you have it. That's my little fake Nene plushie as acting as my bird in my rescue box. And so if you just have one of these in your car, you're always going to be prepared to have a bird. I usually always keep one in my car, and our entire staff keeps one in our car. But it's pretty easy. Even if you don't have one, go to the store. They have cardboard boxes you can put the bird into. And then you can be prepared for a rescue. So all you need is a towel. As you guys can see, the birds are not very large. They're not built for land. They're not going to run away. They're pretty slow. So all you need to do is kind of gently throw a towel over them. And then you always want to grip on the side of the wings because that's kind of going to be the thing that gets them away or that they could injure. So you just kind of want to grab them on the side and then put them gently in your box. And then you've done a rescue for a shearwater. It's pretty easy. Our phone number, again, 24-hour day hotline, 27. Hotline, so you can always call us, and we encourage people to call or text us every time that they find a bird. And so that way we can help coordinate where the bird is going to go. For shearwater season, if we don't get a call beforehand and people are just dropping off birds at the aid stations, we'll be like, okay, we think we have about 4 birds on this route today, and we're expecting 4 birds in the car, and then we have 15 birds, and then our day is drastically different in terms of planning of what we're going to do for the day. So it's helpful for us to know. These have been set up for decades, so a lot of people tend to just drop them off because they know that they're there, which is great. I'd rather have you drop it off than not drop it off. But if you can just give me a little heads up that it's there, that helps our team plan ahead. And then just know your nearest aid station to use. So I do have a slide on that, but this is our setup aid station. It has little cubbies for the birds. We do temperature check them with logs to make sure that every aid station is not going to overheat with the birds inside, so they're nice and safe. So this is a list of our aid stations that you can find on our website, all the public areas that you can drop them off. Our firefighters here are amazing, and they're very kind and will greet you and tell you where you can put the bird and direct you if you can't find the aid station. So we do have the list online as well as the Google points on a map if you have trouble finding it. And then one clarification that I always like to tell the public is our aid stations are deployed from September 15th, pretty much to the day. And then outside of the season, we just have equipped the fire stations with cardboard pet carriers, so that way people can still drop off birds, but because the numbers are not as significant, we don't need a whole setup, and we're too worried about people essentially dropping something off and then not calling, and then no one checks the station daily in the off season, so we don't want to provide something that people can just drop something and we never hear about it. You have a question?
On the north side, also liquor store?
Yes.
Still have one there?
Correct, yes.
And
Yes, so her question was about the Honolulu liquor store aid stations and Kilauea Pharmacy. Those are still 2 public drop-off stations. This I screenshotted off our website now. Once September 15th goes up, I will add the other aid stations that are public. One hotel is technically a private station, so we try not to have the public drop them off because we want to make sure that we understand which birds are from their property and which ones aren't. So we prefer that people would go to the public fire station if they're in that area, since it's just down the road. Yeah, so outside of season, we have cardboard carriers. We are playing with the idea of changing how we do that in the future to make it a little bit more accessible and stable for the birds. But I don't have any news on that yet, but hopefully next time I'm here, I'll have exciting news on that. Okay, so the last thing is just be considerate. As I've talked about in the beginning of this presentation, we're dealing with wildlife. They're not happy to be picked up. They're not happy to come into care. They're not happy that they're grounded. they're not happy campers. So they want to be out at sea fishing with their own species, lying on the wing. So just a reminder for all of us humans, because we don't think about these things necessarily when working with wildlife. We don't want to play music in a car when we're transporting a bird. That is very stressful. The only thing that might be not stressful, which we do in rehabilitation, sometimes we play ocean noises to drown out other noises, but you don't want to put on Kelly Clarkson and be screaming break away in your car while you're transporting an uh-oh. We do not pet, talk, or cuddle them. A lot of people will find the shearwaters and like, he was so calm and he just like let me pick him up. And I'm like, he really had no other option. And also the calmness often is a trait that most wildlife have in terms of they don't want to show that they're in distress or scared. So sometimes they more go into a shutdown mode than an actively trying to fight you mode. And people take that as like, they know I'm rescuing it, which is a great thought, but really they're just really stressed out and they have no other reaction at the time. So even if you think that it's soothing them, I can guarantee that it's not. We want to keep them in a cool, dark, quiet environment if we do have to hold them longer than just the travel to an aid station. So if you're unable to get them to an aid station that night and we have no one to help you, you're like, oh, I might only be able to drop it off at like 6 or 7 tomorrow morning. That's usually fine. We just need to make sure that they stay in a nice location where people aren't going to be peeking in at them and check, just put them in a closet and leave them until the morning, and then you can drive them to me. The less interaction, the better with these birds. You don't want to feed them. You don't want to give them any water. They're fine, I promise. And trying to do so could cause more harm than good. Our birds, their trachea is right at the back of their tongue. and the center of their mouth. So you don't know what you're doing and the bird can't protect its airway, you can easily slip water into their trachea and they can aspirate. Volunteer opportunity. Oh, you're featured. Oh no, my hero. So volunteer opportunities with our program. So Barry is a seasonal transport with us as well as Tanya. And so these are some pictures of him working during shearwater season last year. So he's picking up with his, which I so love, following instructions with the gloves on. The best volunteers ever. The best. So he's getting one out of an aid station. This one looks pretty healthy. So hopefully that one was a quick turnaround. That's him trying to grab some out of an aid station. And then one of my favorite humans, Carol, is here at our washing area, having a blast with our hose. She comes every Friday to clean enclosures and crates for us, which is desperately always needed as well. So we usually have cleaning volunteers as well as transport volunteers. And then you're going to be featured again over there. Same picture, but the big thing that we are recruiting for that we're coming to the end of is seasonal bird transport volunteers. These volunteers, like Barry and Tanya, are scheduled to check our aid stations on one of our routes. So that's the north route or the west route. And they'll check every aid station for birds each day, log them appropriately, get them boxed up for us, and then bring them to us at SOS once a week. So it's usually about a 3 to 4 hour time commitment. And that saves, I can't even tell you, so much time for our staff to actually be able to focus on bird care and the quality of life that the birds have at our facility versus spending time on the roadway. So they are the best and I love them so deeply. So this is something that we're recruiting for. The training for this position is on Saturday this week, but if you're interested and not able to make it to a training, just let me know. If anyone is interested, if you happen to live on North Shore and you go to Costco once a week, the perfect opportunity. You just got to stop really quickly at like 4 places and just really quickly check in some cubbies for me and call it a day. And so anyone who, has to do that Costco run, let me know because I can have you rescuing birds by the end of the week. Currently, because we're on North Shore, I did write the dates that are currently available. So we have 3 volunteers that are covering the other days, but these days are still available and would be helpful if we could get someone to cover one of those days during the week. That's my tentative pitch. Or if you know anyone, now's your time to be like, you want to be a bird hero and have them call me. There's a bug flying right in front of my face. That's pretty much it for today. So this is my contact information, my email, and then we're just at Save Our Shearwaters everywhere, but also you can reach me on the hotline phone, which is available online. I answer that 2 nights a week. So if you find one at 2 a.m. on a Saturday or Sunday, I will be the person that is answering your phone in my bed. And then if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Wrapping it up. Yes.
Since the fledglings need the moon
Mhm.
to guide them,
Since the fledgers need the moon to guide them, why do you release them during the day?
Excellent question. So we release them during the day because we want to try to get them out before the lights are going to distract them again. So we're trying to get them out before the sun goes down, so that way they can make it out far enough to see where they're not going to get light attracted again. So ideally, they're kind of like they're navigating, at night from their burrows as part of like their instinctual nature to go out, but they're also at the point that we get them have already attempted and then failed due to light attraction. So we're not as concerned about using the moon to get them in the right direction as we are of like, we're just going to use the wind speed in the area to get them out. Most of the time we're releasing them around like 3 or 4 p.m. So just a couple hours before sunset. And then once they're out, they can navigate perfectly well. We do have like actual research evidence of that because our satellite tagged a few of our fledglings in a research paper that's online. And so you can see that they track into the same direction that they're supposed to go, even though we're not releasing at nighttime. So we do have evidence that that is okay to do as well. Yeah.
Where does your funding come from? And what's your current fiscal year funding?
Current fiscal year funding. So currently our funding comes from quite an array of places. We're not, I would say, as traditional as normal wildlife centers on the mainland. We do get some funding from the Friends group for birds that we take care of there. We get funding from the utility company, and most of that is from habitat conservation plans as well, which if you guys are kind of in the political sphere of conservation, we have quite a few habitat conservation plans on island. So that are plans that kind of larger properties go into to say, like, we're going to mitigate the effect that we're having on these endangered species in these ways. And so part of that, there was a bill that was passed that requires, if you're in a habitat conservation plan, that you need to provide funding to a rescue effort for whatever you're impacting. So we do get money from habitat conservation plan participants. And then we get a small amount from donations, some grants. We get some from the state, a little bit from the state. But kind of mostly a lot of our funding ended up funneling down because of the Endangered Species Act. So because of the habitat conservation plans that are formed because of the Endangered Species Act, which is really unique. Most wildlife centers operate solely off of donor and grant funding. I think this fiscal year operation budget was like 500 something thousand for operations. I don't know the exact numbers because that's not my job. Yeah, and then it increases kind of every year as inflation goes and electricity, and then we're trying to expand the team as well, because a lot of our staff, have to live here and they make less money than people at Home Depot. So we're also trying to work on encouraging proper pay for conservation workers as well. But yeah, kind of a conglomerate of different things. We're pretty lucky because we work for threatened or endangered species that there are avenues for funding in that direction. But still, as you can see, not enough for us to build a purpose-built facility, because that's millions of dollars, and that's not what we're talking about in terms of funding that we're getting at the time. So we still rely on a lot of public support grants, and then the Friends group as well, and other groups like that, in order to help supplement the funding for the birds. Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions?
Patty?
Oh.
As we do so, yeah, just sharing again that because they're not a full 501c3
Yes.
organization and working under fiscal sponsors, one of those roles, again, that we're really honored to help serve as an outreach arm and a fundraising arm to bring support back to a partner agency. It's just one of several other conservation organizations that the Friends Group is sort of a thread out into the community for. So again, we appreciate our community that comes right back to organizations, boots on the ground, doing the work.
Yeah.
And so proud to play our little role as an intermediary.
I would also say just a shout out to the Friends Group in general, have increased their support through the years for the amount of birds that we've had coming from the refuges, which has been a huge help, and kind of like sometimes like a sigh of relief in terms of trying to be able to fund the work that we do every year. So it's a huge impact on our program every year. So we're super thankful for it.
How high above the ground or water, as the case may be, do shearwaters fly?
Oh, well, they're called shearwaters because they shear. So they shear waves. So a lot of the times they are flying quite low to the ocean line and shearing across the wave patterns. And it always scares my new staff when they release and they're like flying right above a wave and they're like, it's gonna take them out. And I'm like, they're waterproof, guys. They're fine. They dive 140 feet. Like, they're gonna be good. And they're like, but yeah, they like to shear kind of the ocean waves, which is why they kind of get their name shearwater. So they're not usually like high flyers, like maybe an albatross might fly a little bit higher altitude in order to catch the wind better. And since they have different flying techniques, so shearwaters usually are pretty low to the ocean surface, but I don't know the average altitude of flight, although ARC or someone might know off of their GPS and satellite tags about some of those track the altitude of flight, so they might have more information on that exactly. But fun thing about their name.
I'm curious as well, you've mentioned how amazing they are at diving.
Yeah.
What do they eat, or what is their food?
A lot of squid. So lots of squid beaks are often in their stomachs. And you'll often see, they regurgitate squid beaks because they're not able to digest them. So they kind of build up in the system, and then they can bolus out squid beaks at any time, which is usually they puke them out. But yeah, a lot of squid. They eat a few different species of fish depending on the species that you're talking about. But the A'o are the ones that are divers. So A'o dive about 14 stories down, which is about 140 feet in the water. It's pretty interesting. And we have some footage of them diving on the pools, and they look quite incredible. But the Wa'ukani are surface feeders, so they're not diving 140 feet. So even though they're in the same family of bird, they have different foraging techniques. Keep clicking things.
Hi, thanks. I'm just curious, we did hear from Hob about what the proportion of moly are in the refuge, where they're usually found, and what's the proportion, are they found in other places? I know there's quite a large nesting area at Queen's Bath.
You just mean
Right.
wildly, like where they're nesting? right now?
Yeah, whether there's, because I would assume that more fallout, I always thought fallout meant the nest fallout.
Mhm.
So if there's more fallout wherever they're nesting,
Mhm.
right?
Well,
So,
Mole are not really affected by fallout. So
no, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying that she had statistics on the Mole
Mhm.
as to how much was in the community, in the wider
Oh,
community.
like, yeah,
how
where
much
they're
was on
nesting
the
private.
refuge,
Mhm.
how much was,
On private
in various
property.
different places, the proportions. I just wondered if you had any of those statistics.
For shearwaters or?
Yeah, for sure.
There's so many colonies of shearwaters. Honestly, the ARC team and Hawaii Endangered Seabird Recovery Project has more info on like the exact locations of where each colony is
Mhm.
on the island. The Uaukani nest in like the Leilani area. They nest up in they nest at the refuge. They nest along Kailua bike path. They nest along Spouting Horn. So there's like quite a Makawena Point. They nest shipwrecks on that whole cliff face. So they're kind of pretty prevalent all over the island. There's a if
Do you have any, do you have any statistics about?
No, we
About
don't.
specifically the Queen's Bath area, which is posted, but people don't pay any attention to the postings.
So I don't have any statistics on the population levels of different colonies because we're only handling injured wildlife.
Yeah.
So we're not out surveying colonies. So like all of Hobbs' information is from being in the colonies and surveying and gathering that data. That's
Well,
not
I guess
what
I'm
we do,
just
so I don't
curious
have it.
because there was a shearwater that
Yes.
walked along the pool at
Yes.
the cliffs last year that
Mhm.
we were able to rescue.
Mhm.
And I just was curious, but maybe it came from
Yeah, it's hard
where
to
we
know.
come from.
Yeah, they're hard to know which exact colony they're coming from. There was a really, we haven't done a study like it on Hawaii, but someone on Oahu did a study of trying to track fallout, I think using federal bans of banning significant colonies and then tracking where they actually ended up falling out on Oahu. And I think that I believe, and I could be misquoting because I haven't read this paper in a while, that she found that the ones that you thought would be from the colony next door, actually from the colony across the island. So without any data for me to back it up, I'd be hesitating to say where things come from unless they were banded. Also just reading that paper kind of opened, I was like, I would have thought it came from the colony right next door. And it's like on the west side of Oahu it came from and landed on the east side. Yeah, I think that paper I think is online somewhere. That's I think the part of the Freeman Bird Preserve might have been a part of that. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I read it. Freeman Bird Preserve on Oahu I think was part of it, but I don't remember the paper's title off the top of my head. But it was quite interesting, analyzing the fallout and where the birds come from, which we haven't. We know where the birds are falling out on the island, but we can't locate the original colony a lot of times since they're not banded.
I heard that the uh-oh sound like donkeys. True or false?
True. I feel like Andre does a good impression, and I'm not
I was
Andre.
waiting to see if you could hear that. No
I was like,
pressure.
I saw your mischievous look at me, like you gotta make a donkey call. I can't make a donkey call that good, but yeah, some people say they sound like ghosts too, or like babies crying for the uaukani. But the uh-oh kind of sound like a donkey bray, and when they do make it, like their whole neck extends out. Yeah, it's quite funny too because our birds in care, essentially we have a tiny colony in our care at any given point, and sometimes they set each other off at night. So an uaukani will go off, and then the whole rehab room goes off, and uaukani calls, and we're like, ah. She's got another question. That's the uh-oh. Does anyone hear it?
Oh, no.
Oh no.
You made me think though with your question that, certainly we're really proud of the amount of species that are nesting within the safety of the refuges of Kilauea, Pointanale, and Hulaia, and how important that is. But certainly that we're also representing species that know no boundaries. And certainly that's part of this advocacy of trying to support beyond that. And again, just a celebration of, in particular, Princeville, where we are today, the number of species from water birds to seabirds that call this place home, even if it's just part of the year.
Mhm.
And so our awareness around that is part of what's creating that safety. And so it's what makes this place special. for sure, yeah.
It's very biodiverse up here. I mean, I can't. Lahui is nice. That's where I live, but sometimes there's not as many. There's many. I don't have a nene flock in my backyard, which I'm really jealous when I hear about that from other people. I'd probably spend all my day just watching the flock and what are they up to today, and not get anything done.
Any other questions for Jacqueline? Yes.
You used the scientific name of these.
Scientific name, I don't know if I have you on scientific name, if I'm honest.
Well,
Yeah, this is the Oahu, which is the Hawaiian petrel. So I can give the Hawaiian name and the common name. This is Oahu Kani, which is the wedge-tail shearwater, and this is the A'o, which is the mule shearwater. He's an old mount.
We were lamenting the age of our taxidermy here, and it is on our wish list as a friends group to get a replacement of that.
He's seen better days.
Do you find more fallout in the south, like in Lihue and than the north?
No. It's pretty, depends on A'o or Wa'ukani, where the fallout is more often, but the birds do have kind of certain flyaways across the island, and those do mainly tend to be usually from the mountains out west or the mountains out north, and so not a ton centrally. So sometimes more of the stuff we say central is like very rogue birds in that area or Wa'ukani. But we do kind of internally have an idea of where each one kind of tends to go. And we have our hotspot areas that we know that they're likely to fall out in. And that's usually because the birds are flying right through that town. So anyone with a light on would be more likely to down a bird. But other groups such as the Quiet Dangerous Seabird Recovery Project and ARC work on the outreach for that in different areas if they know that birds are being impacted. So
yeah, I have seen some interesting maps to that point that show not necessarily birds nesting here on the North Shore, but that we are a flyway for some of them. And it's really fascinating to see that whole interaction of humans and nesting. And it's from multiple standpoints like that. Really cool stuff.
If you talk story with a lot of people who've lived here for a while too, they'll say that they have seen like the massive A'o before the population kind of declined, and like have seen them fly out in certain areas and see them in Honolulu Bay flying out and all things like that. So it's kind of fun when you get out there and talk to people that have been here for a long time about what the island used to look like before the birds were so deeply impacted.
Yeah, quick plug, just again, the next session will feature Pacific Rim conservation work happening on the refuge. And then in October, I did mention that, but Kesser is actually going to come back and have a deeper dive into some of these species and protection in the heart of fallout season in October. So mid-October, we'll have them back for the first time in our series. So some of those great conversations that you're bringing up, I think we'll be able to, we'll be able to fly into.
And they're so good at talking too about their.
I do love a cheesy pun.
Question. Have you got any data on like how fallout is affected by lighting, dark skies initiatives, et cetera? I know you mentioned it briefly. Is it really affecting birds when there's light?
Yeah.
Especially public areas that we could maybe have some control over and help.
Yeah, you can
nudge
definitely
in the right direction.
Yeah. You can ID a lot of the time if you are talking to the public. Like, as I said, I can ID that it's a light attraction issue because they told me that they have a giant light on their lanai and they're not in an area that they should be. You have areas that used to be hotspots on the island, and then they had some lighting efforts and outreach happen. We don't have a specific lighting ordinance on the island, so you can't like force people to shut their lights off. You can only ask and explain that they've had like birds down in that area and if they're willing to help out. And so there has been, evidence that when they have reduced lighting and there's less birds falling out in that area every year, if they've removed like, even I've heard stories of just like one floodlight, that's been up the whole year, and then they take it down and we didn't see fallout, in those general areas again. So there is evidence that removing the lights in those areas, and that's part of a lot of the work that the conservation groups are doing, like HESERP, is helping inform in areas that there is higher fallout. And how they can mitigate it in that area to see like a direct impact on whether or not the birds come down. I wouldn't say there's like exact necessarily statistics, but yeah, we do have, so many of the groups are working toward actively monitoring how many are power line strikes versus light attraction and trying to kind of figure that out with the data as well. Yeah. Did you have a question before, or did I answer it? I sorry. I could talk story all day, guys. So I'm so sorry you're all stuck here. You can leave if you need to.
So it's related, but it seems like you rely on opportunistic finds of these birds,
Mhm.
and yet there are some hotspot areas where they fall. And
Correct.
have you thought about doing like targeted searches on new moons
is a
with
great-
volunteers?
This is a great question. So the people that are participating in habitat conservation plans, they have bird searchers as part of their plans that are checking their properties at certain intervals required by the plan. So those areas are being periodically checked. We also have the dog searchers that are checking different areas of the island as well for fallout, that are now trained to try to detect seabirds. In terms of a community run effort to find birds, there was like seabird searchers on part of the island for part of the year that was helping out with some of the habitat conservation plan properties. But there, besides for the dog searching, there hasn't been like a full, and that would be, I think, a slippery slope, because you don't want people all going around picking up birds that are healthy in different areas as well. But yeah, there are concerted efforts in areas that there is known high fallout in order to try to find the birds that are down. So it's not just, luck of the draw if you find the bird or not. Yeah, it's an excellent question, because we've been moving toward that and trying to have a more, effective way of getting birds into care as well. Yeah. Very thoughtful question.
What a great conversation. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. We appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Aloha.
Changing it.